Washington Irving, born in 1783 in New York City. He was a trailblazing American author known as the first American man of letters. Initially trained as a lawyer, Irving quickly found his true calling in the literary world. He rose to prominence as a key figure in the publication of Salmagundi, a periodical filled with witty essays and poems that showcase his sharp intellect and humor.
His satirical work, A History of New York by Diedrich Knickerbocker, marked the beginning of his literacy success and set the stage of his future masterpiece. In 1819, Irving captivated readers with his iconic collections of stories. The sketchbook, which included timeless classics like The Legends of Sleepy Hollow and The Rip Van Winkle. These tales solidified his reputation as a master storyteller and secured his place in American literary history.
Following the success of the sketchbook, Irving continued to enchant audiences with his sequel, Bridge Hall, showcasing his versatility and creativity as a writer. Beyond his literary achievements, Irving also ventured into the world of diplomacy, serving in Madrid, Spain. His experiences abroad influenced his later works such as The Alhambra, which reflected his fascination with Spain's rich history and culture. Washington Irving's legacy as a pioneering American author and cultural ambassador endures with his timeless tales, continuing to captivate readers around the world. And one of his popular works, the short story, The Devil and Tom Walker. Have you heard about the story of The Devil and Tom Walker by Washington Irving?
No, Mom.
So now let me read you about the story of The Devil and Tom Walker. The Devil and Tom Walker. Before the story of Tom Walker begins, the narrator sets the scene by telling us about the pirate Captain Kidd, who long ago buried his ill-gotten treasure in a dismal swamp not far from Boston, Massachusetts. Old stories have it that the devil himself, known as Old Scratch, guards the money as he always does with buried treasure that's been immorally acquired. Kidd never enjoyed his wealth, however, for he was arrested in Boston soon after burying it and later executed in England for his crimes. The story proper opens in 1727. Tom Walker is a miserly, outrageously greedy man who lives near the swamp with his nagging, scolding, just as greedy and abusive wife. Their house is forlorn, dilapidated, and has about it an air of starvation, as does their horrifically skinny horse. One evening, Tom is taking a shortcut home through the swamp when he comes to the ruins of an old Indian fort. There he decides to rest, but as he idly pokes with his staff into the earth, he finds an old skull, which he kicks to shake the dirt from it. "Let that skull alone," says a voice, which belongs to none other than the devil Old Scratch, who has a pure black face, as if covered in soot, and carries around an axe. Old Scratch explains that this swampland isn't the property, as Tom supposes, of Deacon Peabody, a respected religious official in Boston, but rather belongs to Old Scratch himself. To prove it, he shows Tom a tree on which the deacon's name is carved. The tree appears to be thriving on the outside but is rotten within. Just as Peabody is successful in the eyes of the world, but morally rotten and doomed to damnation. All the nearby trees are similarly marked with the names of great men from the colony, including the one Tom is sitting on, which bears the name of Crown and Shield, a mighty man rich from buccaneering, who the devil tells Tom is ready to burn. Tom and Old Scratch walk towards Tom's house together and converse in earnest about the Captain Kidd's pirate treasure as well as a business deal, presumably that Tom sell his soul to the devil in exchange for Kidd's treasure. Tom needs time to think about it when he asks for proof that what the devil says is true. Old Scratch puts his finger to Tom's forehead and leaves his signature, a black, irremovable fingerprint. At home, Tom's wife tells her husband that Absalom Crown and Shield was just announced dead, which confirms to his mind the truth of what the devil told him. Moreover, burdened by his secret of having met Old Scratch in person, Tom at last tells his wife what happened in the swamp. The prospect of Kidd's gold excites the greed of Tom's wife, and she urges her husband to accept the devil's offer. Merely to spite her, however, Tom decides against it. Consequently, his wife decides to strike up a bargain with Old Scratch herself, and so she fearlessly treks to the old Indian fort one evening, only to return late that night, sullen and unsuccessful. She decides that in her second attempt, she needs to make the devil an offering, and so she gathers up the household silver into her apron without Tom's knowledge and heads out into the swamp again. This time, she never returns. Tom misses the silver more than his wife. The most probable story as to her fate holds that when Tom went to search for her in the swamp some days later, he found only her apron, bundled into which were a heart and liver, as well as evidence that his wife and Old Scratch had physically fought before the devil bested her. Tom consoles himself for the loss of his silver with the happier fact of the loss of his wife, and even feels grateful to the devil for wrestling her down to death and damnation. He decides that now's the time to sell his soul to the devil in exchange for Captain Kidd's treasure, and after several failed attempts to rendezvous with Old Scratch, Tom at last meets him one night on the edge of the swamp. Slowly but surely, the two begin to haggle for the terms of their deal, the devil now adding new conditions, such as that Tom not only sell his soul, but also become a slave trader. Although Tom's conscience cannot permit him to enter this profession, he agrees eagerly to become a usurer, someone who lends out money at interest, instead in accordance with the devil's terms, and the two strike a bargain. A few days' time finds Tom sitting at his desk in a counting house in Boston. He quickly develops a reputation for lending out money, which people more and more require because the local economy under Governor Belcher's administration has recently collapsed and many get-rich-quick schemes and wild real estate ventures have come to nothing, leaving money scarce and people desperate. Indeed, Tom's door is soon thronged by customers, whom Tom exploits by charging high interest and also by securing debts mercilessly. He soon becomes a rich man, building an ostentatiously vast home he never finishes or even furnishes out tight-fistedness. He also buys a carriage and 2 horses, all of which he lets fall into poor condition.
As Tom grows older, however, he becomes anxious about having sold his soul into damnation in exchange for merely worldly success. He begins, therefore, to take measures to cheat the devil of his due. He becomes a churchgoer, zealous in proportion to his sinfulness. He judges his neighbors severely, and he revives discussion of persecuting the Quakers and Anabaptists as heretics. He also carries Bibles with him all the times, one in his coat pocket, one on his counting house desk to ward off Old Scrooge. More crazily, Tom also has his horse buried, fully equipped, and upside down so that on Judgment Day, when the world turns topsy-turvy, he can outturn the devil's clutches. One hot afternoon, Tom, wearing a silk morning gown, is in the counting house foreclosing the mortgage of the land jobber, a ruined investor in land who begs for a few more months more to pay Tom back. The land jobber reminds Tom that he has already made much money out of him, but Tom just impatiently and impiously replies, "The devil take me if I have made a farthing." Right on cue, the devil with a great black horse in his company knocks at Tom's door. Tom answers. "Tom, you're come for," the devil says. And though Tom attempts to escape, his Bible is buried on his desk under the mortgage that he was just foreclosing on. So, the devil whisked Tom onto the back of his black horse, which gallops away in the midst of thunderstorm. Tom Walker never returned to foreclose the land jobber's mortgage. One story holds that the horse galloped with him back to the old Indian fortress, where the two disappeared in a bolt of lightning. After Tom's disappearance, the Bostonians, who are given the task of taking care of his abandoned estate, find that there's nothing, in fact, to care for. His bonds and mortgage are reduced to cinders. His gold and silver have turned to wood, chips, and fillings. His horses have turned to skeletons, and the next day, even his vast house goes up in flames. Such is the end of Tom Walker and his ill-gotten wealth, though it is said to this day that he continues to hunt on horseback the old Indian fort in the swamp, still wearing his morning gown. The end of the story. And out of the story, what were your observations on the themes, the characters, and just all about the story?
So, in the story, ma'am, the devil guards the treasure not to protect it, but so as to use it in tempting others to live of sin. And also, Captain Kidd is representative of all the story's greedy characters whose effort to slake their greed result not in earthly pleasure but self-destruction. And Tom's shortcut through the swamp symbolizes the shortcuts that people take to prosper in this world. Another map is that the skull is a reminder in the story portrays death, and in a metaphorical sense, all that comes out of the swamp, even the Captain Kidd's gold, brings death with it. And the only entity that has possession of the physical world is the devil, who uses it to tempt human beings to their damnation, and the swamp both reveals the moral corruption of human society leaders thriving on the outside but rotten on the inside, and also foreshadows who will soon populate the hell. And significantly, the names on the doomed trees refer mostly, if not entirely, to the great men of the colony, it implying that to become rich and powerful one must also morally contaminate oneself. That's all.
Mr. Tuan, what were your takeaways and your understanding about the story?
So for me, ma'am, The Devil and the Tom Walker is a cautionary tale that explore themes of greed, morality, and the consequences of making deals with the devil. The story follows Tom Walker, a miserly man who encounters the devil in the form of a mysterious woodsman in a dark and foreboding forest. Tom ultimately sells his soul in exchange for wealth, leading to a series of events that highlights this destructive nature of greed and the pursuit of material gain at the expense of one's moral values. Washington Irving portrays the danger of succumbing to the temptation and the corrupting influence of greed man. Tom's relentless pursuit of wealth leads him to make increasingly unethical choices, ultimately resulting in his downfall. The story serves as a stark reminder of the importance of maintaining one's integrity, resisting the allure of easy riches, as well as the consequences of prioritizing material wealth over moral principles. Overall, ma'am, The Devil and the Tom Walker served as a powerful allegory that encourages readers to reflect on the choices they make and the values they hold dear. It underscores the timeless lesson that true wealth lies is not material possession, but in the integrity and moral character of an individual. Thank you, ma'am.
I do agree with you that material things should not overpower our principles, and instead one should focus on more important things. And what about the characters?
So the character in the story was Tom Walker, who is the protagonist of the story, who offered his soul to the devil in return for wealth. And next is the old Scratch, who is the devil, who lured Tom Walker to offer his soul. And Tom Walker's wife is greedy and abusive one. And next is Captain Kidd, the owner of the ill-forgotten treasure, and the other characters or other supporting characters is Deacon, Peabody, Absalom, Crown and Shield, and the Land Jobber.
In addition, the story of The Devil and Tom Walker by Washington Irving was published in 1824 as a part of a collection of short stories entitled Tales of a Traveler. The story about a greedy miser who agrees to sell his soul for money is a modern retelling of Christopher Marlowe's 16th century play. Marlowe's The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus is about a German astrologer who sells his soul to the devil in exchange for knowledge and wisdom. Both Marlowe's play and Irving's short story later influenced Stephen Vincent Bennett's short story The Devil and Daniel Webster, published in 1936. One of the literary works of Washington Irving that we could recommend is the story Rip Van Winkle. This is a short story by the American author Washington Irving that is first published in 1819. It follows a Dutch-American villager in colonial America named Rip Van Winkle, who meets mysterious Dutchmen, imbibes their strong liquor, and falls deeply asleep in the Catskill Mountains. He awakes 20 years later to a very changed world, having missed the American Revolution. Inspired by a conversation on nostalgia with his American
expatriate brother-in-law, Irving wrote the story while temporarily living in Birmingham, England. It was published in his collection, The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon Gent, while the story is set in New York's Catskill Mountains, near where Irving later took up residence.
Introduction to gel. O, di ba, Kyle? So, oh my God. Ano siya? Go gel! Kaya niyo yan!